My Govanen won it all, and thank you for joining us yet again for The Literary Baptists, a podcast where we examine great works of literature through the lens of a confessional Baptist. How is everyone this evening? The fellowship is back again.
Yes.
The fellowship is whole. We are no longer sundered.
Yeah, I'm back from making my stew with Eowyn.
I regret nothing. Okay. I regret nothing. Okay, no. So I saw. I think it was in the Christian Lord of the Rings meme group, whatever. Today, I can never remember the name of that group, but anyway, apparently some lab in Israel has made like lab grown whitefish. It like had these little nuggets of like whitefish. And then it was a picture from a news article, and then at the bottom it was Aragorn from the movies like spitting out the white thing from from Eowyn's stew, and I'm like, this is perfect. This frame has been waiting for this story to come.
I saw that and I thought of the same thing.
It was
thanks
perfect.
to your comment.
You're welcome.
From last podcast.
I'm glad I made your week.
They 3D printed the fish.
Oh, it was 3D printed.
Yeah, it was 3D printed fish meat.
Imagine throwing that in your taco. Like, oh, great. Fish taco night. Better 3D print some dinner.
Although, I mean, sometimes that sounds a little like a nice thing. I don't know about fish.
Meat?
Fish? 3D printed dinner, like Jetson style. Like, I just want you to make me dinner, and then it's like 3D print like a pizza or something.
So this is just a step away from a replicator from Star Trek. That's like
pretty much, yeah.
You go into the gas station, you're like, man, I'm hungry. I could go for a pizza. You push the button, it's like, zzz,
that would be pretty.
And then it puts the pizza out.
It reminds me of the thing from remember Back to the Future Part 2, and they're in the futuristic home, and the grandparents come over, and they're like, we brought pizza. And it's like this tiny little foil package, and they unwrap the thing, and there's this tiny little pizza. It reminded me of the little pizzas that came with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures, and they put that on the plate and they shove it in this little machine, and in like 3 seconds go by, and they pull out this enormous, beautiful deluxe pizza, and Old Man McFly says, "Oh boy, you sure can hydrate a pizza."
Pizza sounds good right now.
Yeah, I think I can imagine a 3D printed pizza. All right. I don't know why they would start with fish. That seems like pretty treacherous.
And what's there to stop them?
Could you get food poisoned by 3D printed food?
Like, probably not.
If too much like of the if too much of the plastic filament that they had in there from 3D printing death whistles or something, and then it gets in the pizza, like that sounds like that would be bad.
I would trust 3D printed sushi from a gas station more than I trust whatever they have right now.
I love gas station 3D printed sushi.
Is it actual?
It's one of my favorite road
or
snacks.
Is it just flavored?
It comes from lab grown cells of whitefish.
So it's actually fish.
Replicated.
It's not.
Yeah, it's like actual fish material, but they've grown it in a lab and 3D printed it into some form. It's what it
really
looked
weird.
Like. It was really weird.
It's weird to me that you can print something in organic matter. That's bizarre.
It is bizarre.
Blurring the lines between technology and organics. It's the Borg.
Yeah, it says umami meat takes cells from a kind of fish called grouper and grows them into muscle and fat. Then Stakeholder Foods then adds them to Bio Inc. that works with special 3D printers. The result, a narrow fillet that copies the properties of sea caught fish.
I love a narrow fillet.
Yeah.
Put a little
yeah, right down on the menu. 3D printed.
I love the ink.
Would you like the narrow fillet of 3D printed grouper?
With ink. It's got ink in it.
But you got to get ahead of this, and you got to open a restaurant where you have the 3D printer like right in front of you
At the table.
and you watch it just like 3D print.
Does it still have to be cooked?
Or it could be like a conveyor belt, and it's just a permanent thing of fillet just coming across, and you just
like
slice however big piece you
an
want.
eternal scroll of fish. You just chop little bits out.
Fish,
However much you want.
balls.
I want more than a narrow fillet. Can you do that? We'll just
Oh, you
cut
just take
2
2 or
bits and
3.
set them side by side.
Yeah, boop boop boop. Just stack them. They'll have tiers like a cake.
Fish noodles.
Oh man.
Yeah, sounds great.
It
I'm
kind
in.
of looks
Noodles,
like
though,
a
like-
bird poop. Like it doesn't look real appetizing.
The white part of bird poop or whatever.
Mm. You should be in their marketing department.
Yeah,
That
like an
is-
AI commercial.
It's print you this fish.
You
before
could
you're
start the commercial with like a bird, and it like flies away, and then at the bottom is like the fillet.
Wow, man.
I think an AI wrote this commercial.
Yeah, you're basically
wa-
Chat GPT.
Do you want eat leavings of bird? Bird eat fish. You can too.
Oh my gosh.
This is starting off really well, you guys.
Yeah.
It's a great episode. Let's just leave it at that.
I bet Middle Earth did not have 3D printed fish fillets.
I do wonder though.
am fish.
It does talk about, in the chapter we were reading, it does talk about them enjoying the sound of the sea and everything. And I feel like being, 3D printed fish are a land organism-ish that would long for the sea.
Yeah, if you're living at the bottom of Taniquetil, where Monway lives, and you're not going to go to the ocean, the way that you slake that thirst is you print some fish
Yeah.
under the light of
I
Telperion.
think that's one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard. Like, hey, I think we should print some fish.
It's some of the sentences that we're saying are
What?
probably the first time anyone's ever said them.
I don't remember the statistic, but it's a very high number of novel sentences that people say. Like,
Yeah.
most sentences you say have never been said before, and this is definitely one of those conversations that have never happened
Yeah.
until recently, at least.
I know we're not progressives, but we really are pushing something forward here.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of these advancements we're
Ooh,
making.
it does make a good point, though. There's no bones in it.
Yeah.
They
That's
didn't
a big
3D print the
plus.
bones.
Yeah,
Have
that's
you
a big
ever
plus.
tried to eat a whole fish? Man,
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
puzzle.
Fish bones are
Yeah,
the worst.
like,
Puzzle.
like in the Lord of the Rings movie when Smeagol,
Mhm.
Oh.
Just
like that's
chomps right down.
Can you imagine how
can't-
much nicer that would have been if that was a 3D printed fish?
Maybe when they remake the movies, it'll be a 3D printed fish and not an actual
Maybe.
fish.
Yeah, there'd be no blood.
It'll be juicy sweet all the way through. No bones to spit out.
And then you could 3D print some potatoes.
Ah, yeah. A 3D printed potato sounds amazing.
That does sound good.
I would definitely try a 3D printed potato. That sounds pretty safe.
I mean, we
I mean,
basically
just
have that with
fries.
instant potatoes, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah. Those,
No more potato famine.
yeah.
Yeah, right. No blights could affect those potatoes.
yeah, we don't have to
If-
grow crops anymore.
Yeah.
These
If there's
companies
gonna be-
have control.
Like a James White style debate, I will definitely take the position of defending instant mashed potatoes. I don't know if that's something that somebody wants to take me up on, but I could definitely sit there and debate instant mashed potatoes for a couple hours.
Versus 3D printed potatoes, or versus
Well,
Idaho's famed export.
I'm not sure about 3D printed potatoes. I need to see a little. I need to try them. first, but I'll defend instant mashed potatoes. I'll defend the flakes. I'm team flakes.
I think Burger King fries are pretty equivalent to like what a 3D printed potato would taste like.
Yeah.
I love Burger King fries.
Really? Oh, they're the worst. They're
so good. They're so good. They taste like potatoes, fries. Except imagine the potatoes coming out of a computer.
Whopper, 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 Whopper. I really like Wendy's fries. Really, I think they're my favorite.
Not bad. They're not bad.
The little bit of peel on them.
I like McDonald's fries.
McDonald's fries are really good.
McDonald's fries,
but I do love Burger King fries. I'll defend Burger King. Burger King's also a Floridian company, and I always defend Florida.
Didn't Burger King do the chicken fries at one point? Like they were like little.
Of course they did.
I always wanted to try those, but I never did.
They were good.
They sound like my kind of thing.
They were just chicken nuggets.
They're just, they're just long chicken nuggets.
Yeah, that's all they were.
So imagine if you 3D printed a chicken nugget.
I'm saying Burger King, like they've had this in their pocket this whole time, and now it's just coming out to the public. I'm pretty sure everything they've ever cooked has been 3D printed.
Ooh. Their French toast sticks? Those are good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Those are good.
See, Burger King, the future is bright. Maybe I'll be post-millennial. If all food is Burger King in the future, I'll be post-millennial.
Oh, no.
Oh my gosh.
But
let it be so.
I would die. From like congestive heart failure.
Yeah, but everybody would.
Better than rabies. Are you kidding me?
Everybody would.
That's better than so many things you could die from.
I'm not sure it's the best way to die, though.
No, the best way to die. I know that this is. I was thinking about this when I was reading the chapter, but like, what? So like, on the moving island, let's say you get the village idiot of the Teleri, right? Who's like standing on the edge. It like falls off as they're like trying to go to Valinor, and he falls off and drowns in the ocean. Like, I could just
surely they have a life island that they can send off for him.
Listen, if Galadriel can swim across the entire ocean, nobody's drowning from falling off. That's a good point.
You are so right.
She would jump in and save him.
Yeah.
Or Sauron pick him up on his raft. They'd be good.
Yeah.
If there's one thing we know about Sauron is he knows how to steer a boat.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's definitely deep in the lore. and he really wanted to kiss Galadriel or something.
Yeah. It's true.
There's nothing quite like dating a Dark Lord.
Yeah.
Or almost dating a Dark Lord.
Yeah. You dated Ungoliant, right?
I know, she broke my heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. This has been a great start.
Yeah, good start.
Fabulous.
So, what's everybody been reading lately?
I've been reading training stuff for realtors.
Oh yeah, embarking on your new career.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is that what's going? Oh,
it's my realtor pin.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is that like when you when you fly on an airplane the first time and they give you the little wings?
They give you wings, yeah. It's kind of like that, except I didn't fly, so yeah.
That's cool.
Oh boy, you're gonna fly though, baby.
Oh yeah,
I believe in you.
Oh yeah. Every time every time a house goes on the market, a realtor gets a pin.
I thought you were gonna make a little like Spider-Man joke about like the Spidey sense tingling or whatever. Like, a realtor just knows. Realtor sense just starts lighting up. There's a house.
It's just materializing out of nowhere. Someone's gonna need to
judge
live in
based. If you judge based on all these sales calls I get, people like, we'd like to buy your house. It comes maybe about 6 months later, after you've already sold the house.
Like, yeah, talk to the new owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to sell the house I just sold.
If you're gonna give me the money, that's fine. I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know what I've been reading?
Yeah, what?
George Marsden's biography of Jonathan Edwards.
Looky.
Thick.
It is thick. It's a very big one.
Oh,
I looked up online. I was like,
dummy thick.
Best Christian biographies, and this was on all these lists. So I said, all right, I'll do it. But it makes me feel horrible about myself. Like
about how little you've accomplished for the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, he's like 26 and all this huge list. He's already starting like a revival and everything. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I know that it's not, it's not all.
He's made more resolutions than I've made in my entire life.
It's resolutions. Yeah. Like
they will make you cry.
Yeah. Because I don't do these things. I can do them. Well, I don't. Let's just put it that way. Let's just put it as,
you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength, Nicholas.
Yes, exactly. But I don't. And so,
well, when you get the second work of grace, you will.
Okay.
We all know this.
Yeah.
Let the reader understand.
Yeah, I'll work towards that. But it's very good. It's very interesting. I think he does a good job of taking the life, like the narrative part, and adding in the culture around. So like what was going on in New England at the time, and then also adding in like the ideas. What was influencing him. It talks a lot about John Locke, and he was like reading John Locke, and it brings those in.
Worldly philosophy.
Yeah, he was really into worldly philosophy.
Oh boy.
But it doesn't just do it in sections. So like if you read like is it Here I Stand, the biography of Martin Luther? It's kind of like there's a narrative at the beginning, and then it kind of talks about the idea. Yeah. And there's like the idea stuff towards the end. This one just kind of mixes it all together, which I actually like that. I think it's a good thing. So
that sounds like a good thing. Did you take it out from your local library?
I did.
I saw the kind of plasticky wrapping on it. Made me think.
Yes. My local library has some good books.
How many extensions are you going to have to get in order to finish it?
I've already done one. I'm only right there.
They're never getting this book back.
Yeah, I know. It's all right. I've started so many books and I haven't finished anything. I need to.
It's gonna be like Jerry Seinfeld in the Tropic of Cancer. It's gonna Mr. Bookman, the library detective, is gonna come looking for that book 20 years later. I hope that's not too
eventually
much cut, but
yeah, I mean,
that's one of my favorite episodes.
I'm a nothing forever guy. So
good joke.
Yeah.
Maddie, what's been on your to be read or currently read pile?
Well, I finally finished the Sayers book that I was doing, my whodunit, which was Clouds of Witness, because I'm pretty sure I started that in like February and I finished it like 2 weeks ago because I kept putting it down and losing it. So I'd set it down and then couldn't find it, and then I'd find it a few weeks later, and then I'd pick it back up again and read it and lose it. So I finally got it. And I finished it. And I was like, oh,
So reading the book was like a whodunit for you.
Yes. Yeah, I had my own
Oh,
little
yeah.
detective quest going on, a side quest to the
Who
book.
done it and where'd it go?
And I feel like I've read it twice because I had to keep like going back and like, okay, what happened? But I really enjoyed it.
2 books.
I should. I feel like I read it back to back, same time.
You gonna count that as your reread?
Yeah. Might as well, man. I'm all about it.
Oh, that's smart. That's a strategery.
Yeah. I will say I think I liked the Whose Body better.
I loved that
of
book.
the two. I think only because Clouds of Witness had so many people, like characters in play. There's a lot of different like trails, and I think I just needed the simplicity of Whose Body, where it wasn't quite that many. Because I was losing track, partly because I kept losing the book, but I was losing track of who was who, and I was like, wait a second,
that's a problem.
Yeah, but I did really enjoy it, and she's a pretty good writer.
How many shaved cadavers were in Clouds of Witness?
None.
Oh, not enough.
None. Yeah, no.
That is not enough for me.
One dead body trying to figure out how who done it.
Hard pass.
Yeah, but then we also finished Fellowship of the Ring finally as a family.
Nice.
So that was good.
What'd the boys think?
Oh, they loved it. They all really enjoyed it. And they're like, now I understand why like people don't like the movies or things like that from books because they've experienced so much more.
They got to experience Tom Bombadil.
Yes. I was so excited. I was like, I could not wait for that. Those couple chapters coming up there, and all my boys, including my husband, very much enjoyed it. And he's doing a class on for his degree. He's doing the Psalms and Proverbs, and he's talked a lot about how those books have given him, like with The Hobbit, because he's done The Hobbit and The Fellowship, have given him appreciation for song and poetry.
Yes.
Nice.
So he's really enjoying that from that perspective.
Viva la poetry.
Yeah, Lee's happy dance.
Yeah, that was awesome, Lee.
But yeah, he's that has been really cool. So, and right now the kids and I are doing Treasure Island.
Ooh.
So, because they've been really into pirates. Not like because they're older boys, so they're not like dressing up like pirates anymore, but they like the sea shanties. Yeah, they like the sea shanties and Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that. So
back in my younger days, I was a pirate as well. I had Napster, and then I used some other ones as well, and eventually torrenting and stuff. I don't do it anymore, but
did you forget to read the anti-piracy label?
Yeah. So
the seas were just too dangerous. I had to give it up.
Yeah. You can let them know that you know a pirate.
I know a pirate. But so that's been fun. And then I don't know, I feel like I've read another book recently. Well, I've done a lot of like parenting books lately, which felt like needed. And yeah, because we're living that preteen teenage life, so I'm appreciating that as well.
At least it's boys. It could be worse.
Yeah. Oh, it's not bad. It's just like you're navigating
new waters.
Well, yeah,
new uncharted waters. If only you had a pirate
relationships.
Oh yeah.
I feel like my girls are easier than my boys.
Really?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that's like.
As someone with 2 daughters and only 1 son, thank you. That was nice. It was a good thing to hear. Appreciate it.
Nick was starting to spiral into depression.
4 boys. So
I can only speak for boys because I can speak for daughters because I was one. But
no, Cap.
Yeah,
that's Cap. You were a horse.
I wanted to be a horse.
You were trans species.
Yeah, my parents wouldn't let me transition, so here I am. But I don't know, boys are just they make silly mistakes, I guess.
Yes, they do.
Poor decision-making skills.
As a former boy, I concur.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
My dad always called it teen disconnect. So like I would do some stupid teen thing and like dad would be nearby and his signal for that would be like that. Just like the synapses in my brain had just come apart.
It's so right.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've told my
props
wife,
to Pops for the teen disconnect.
I've told my wife so many times the boys are just really stupid. Like even adult men like will say or do something extremely stupid and it doesn't even register until the woman is like, whatever, it's like, why did you do that? Why do you hate me? And I'm like, what did I say? Oh yeah, I can see now how that was really stupid.
Oh yeah.
I tell stories to my kids sometimes and I'm like, you know what? I probably shouldn't be saying you kids never do that. That's a really terrible thing. That's a bad idea. I did this with my son just yesterday. Or maybe it's 2 days ago, but I was like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, we were at the beach and we had to go to a different part of the beach. And so I just climbed on and I was hanging on the back of a Jeep and somebody drove us over to a different spot. And I was like, actually never, ever do that. That's a terrible idea to just hang on the outside of somebody's Jeep. That's bad, super dangerous, really bad. And
how did we survive?
Yeah, quite frankly, it's a miracle that I'm alive today. Along those lines, like riding on top of vehicles. Yeah. Yeah, God was like,
Yeah.
He sent me the angels from Africa to make sure that I didn't fall off.
Yeah. I hear the sound of the abundance of rain. I hear the sound of victory.
Exactly. You got it.
I know the chants.
What about you, Lee?
I had the immense pleasure of reading this bad boy, The Warding.
Yes.
Golly.
Yes.
That was phenomenal.
Yes.
I will be reading more. I will be reading more Trollope. I don't know that I don't think I'd ever actually read a full work of his before. But that was so good. And it took twists and turns that I really didn't expect. I was very pleased. So that was good. And I'm currently working through this bad boy, The Temple.
The Temple.
George Herbert from my poetry collection. It has not disappointed. So much so that I am maybe a third of the way done with it. I've been working on it for more than a month, but it's that good. You just and you do have to read poetry slower to appreciate all of it, because it's so much more than just the words of the poem. There's depth to the craft of it too that is worth taking slowly and appreciating, and definitely Herbert's one of the greats.
I feel like he should probably teach us a class on that or something, because I think that's something that I probably don't understand as well as I'd like to. Like,
I'd love to do that.
What's the sort of like music theory? I get that, but what's poetry theory?
The poetry version of music theory, basically.
Yeah.
They are way more similar than people think.
Yeah,
or I should say, should be more similar than it has been. But yeah, love it.
The my poetry book that I've started it. I had just been using a PDF because it's in the public domain, but I ordered and got a like an old copy of William Barnes's Poems of Rural Life in the Dorset Dialect, and awesome. I love it. I love having this kind of country accent in and it's not like overly done. It's not like pretentious in any way. It's just nice, rural poetry. But there's a lot of depth to it, in a good way. Mm-hmm. It's not depth like, oh, maybe this is like sinister in some way, but it's wholesome. Wholesome's a good word for it.
Yeah,
if you want the darkness stuff, John Clare is a poet that does a lot of his poems are very animal nature focused, but he had a very he wrote all of his poems from a mental hospital, so obviously there's like a dark edge to it. It's kind of nice. That's a little too contemporary, I kind of want, sometimes I just kind of want something like what you're describing, something more simple, down to earth in a quite literal way.
Yeah, the kids and I dabbled in Chaucer a little bit a couple weeks ago.
Ooh.
Because it came up with our history. So that's the only that, and I think we're gonna memorize the Charge of the Light Brigade. I've been trying to find a poem to motivate my kids to memorize again because they really like Jabberwocky.
I love Jabberwocky.
The coolest thing, I have to brag on my son, my youngest. We went to a talent show, which he didn't want to do it. But we got there and people are like, well, what would you have done? He's like, Jabberwocky. And he just recited the whole poem right there on the spot. He didn't have to practice it or anything. So nice. I was like, we're going to have to add a little bit more into your memory bank there. But so maybe it'll be in the Charge of the Light Brigade.
He's memorized a bunch of nonsense words.
Yeah. But I think partly, we've done scripture and stuff, but I think he likes the adventure of the Jabberwocky. It's just kind of fun and silly. So
it is very adventurous. A fun thing about
Brillig
was there is a recording of Alfred Lord Tennyson reading the Charge of the Light Brigade onto a wax cylinder.
Oh wow!
I had it in CD form. It was a collection called oh no, it wasn't called Poetry Out Loud. It was something. Anyway, it was original recordings of poets reading their classic poems. And that one was the oldest one that they had as an extant recording of somebody from that era reading their own poem. It was really hard to hear, but you could hear you couldn't understand the whole thing. You kind of had to read along with it in order to get it, but you could kind of hear his rhythm as he read it and stuff. It was very, very cool. I'm trying to find it on YouTube. I think there is one, but it's kind of creepy because it's like one of those videos where they took a still photo and then made it look like he was talking, made the lips and eyes move and stuff. It's a little upsetting. So I'm thrilled to be back in the Silmarillion again tonight. It's been a while. So our chapter is kind of it's an interesting title. Up to this point, the chapter titles have been kind of explanatory, beginning of days, introducing certain characters. And then we have of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalie, which sounds like a chapter that would scare somebody away if they don't know anything. Too many made up words. I can't do this. But
I'm glad you said Eldalie because I would have said Eldalie.
Oh, yeah, I'm seeing that now. I could see how you would pronounce it that way. You get the weird little umlaut acts differently with Tolkien stuff. I'm just trying to go back. I think it was in chapter 3? We started getting near the end of chapter 3. We were getting the names of important elves at that point and their different clans. I think I said at that point that's the part where people's eyes start to glaze over and they're like, "Oh no, this is getting complicated."
Yeah, so I've already forgotten who everybody was.
It's okay. You're not alone.
Cards on the table, not my favorite chapter.
Yeah.
This one's like setup.
It does feel like setup. Like, in order to understand what's going to happen, like, we have to put everybody in their place. Yeah. I get you there.
Yeah. I might rewrite it for the future editions of the Silmarillion and call it the Island Boys.
The Hawaiian pigeon version.
We need that.
Or all the elves that live on Tol Eressëa all have like those crazy face tattoos that the Island Boys did, and they just sing that song over and over again.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think is important. That's what I imagine them as. The weird hair and everything.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could dig that.
Yeah.
So fun fact, so that the Lonely Island, which is then called Tol Eressëa, from what I understand, in early drafts, Tolkien intended for that island to be England in the future. But he abandoned that idea, and because Tol Eressëa is like over there by Amman, and when the world has changed, it wouldn't be in the right place. So he did,
unless that's America.
Unless that's true. Man, I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have ChatGPT write that chapter.
Although, what is Ireland?
Just
sprouts out of nothing.
Tuna.
That should be the name of the episode. What is Ireland?
What is Ireland?
What is Ireland?
I've been taking notes about potential potential episode titles. That'll go in the list.
Great.
We've had some doozies already, and we've just gotten started. So one of the first things I thought, so in this, we've got elves going over to Valinor in kind of a few different stages, I guess. I don't know if stages is the right word for it, but at different times, they're not all flocking over as one people. The different clans come over at different times and have different motivations, different impediments in their way of getting there. And the way that they do is my boy Ulmo, once again, just being an absolute workhorse of a Vala, decides to make an island act as a ferry. And so he basically has the elves who are going to cross over get on this hunk of rock, and then he drags it through the ocean and carries them over to the shores of Valinor on Amman. I don't know. I had a stupid thought when I was reading it. I had never thought this before in previous readings, but would it have been cooler, and maybe it would have been too overt, but why wouldn't Ulmo just like split the ocean like the Red Sea and have the elves just like walk across to Valinor? I think that would have been epic. Would that have been too obviously biblically symbolic?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like instead of doing like a land bridge, he was like, I'm just going to do a land ferry.
It's kind of cool.
It's weird.
No, it is. It's good.
It is good.
We have so much input on this.
It's not what I would have, if I was writing it, it's not what I would have thought.
Well, you're not as creative as the professor.
Thanks for reminding me.
He's in a different framework.
Yeah.
I mean, the man was playing 4D chess in the fictional world.
And the islands were his pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, I have something that's sort of related, but wasn't there recently some politician that thought that islands did just kind of float around? and was confused about that.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, maybe, probably.
That sounds like a bunch of malarkey to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is.
I don't know. That sounds like a very AOC thing to me.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, with
the
changing sea levels, it could uproot all the islands and move them to other places.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be a real problem in the future.
I guess.
Yeah, I was just like reading this. I was just curious if there was like some other myth of like a moving island that I don't know about. Like, is it in some other folklore?
Well,
I thought of
I
the
couldn't think of
world
one.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I don't know.
The thing I was referring to is Representative Hank Johnson. This is actually in 2010. Believed that the island of Guam would get so many soldiers and military buildup on one side that it would tip over and capsize. So it's been around at least since 2010. This idea of a floating island.
Wow.
Thought that Guam did that, I guess.
We really aren't sending our best.
This is a congressman.
Brandon Sanderson kind of copied this, the moving island thing, but in his work, it's like a giant crustacean that has cities on its back.
It's
like
turtles all the way
turtle.
down, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not turtles, but similar.
That's the only thing I was thinking of was like the islander like idea that it's like the back of a turtle shell.
Mm-hmm. There are floating islands in C.S. Lewis's Perelandra. So that's another example. I don't know. I mean, this came first, but they may have talked about that together.
It does. Oh, that's
It's almost like they were friends or something.
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, they could have known each other. I mean, they were both in England at the same time.
Yeah. They would go to the pub same time.
Yeah,
same
I heard
days.
A club met there. I don't know if they were part of that club or not.
Yeah. Wow, what a coincidence if they both were.
Man, yeah, can you imagine like two geniuses in the UK around the same time, both super interested in the medieval world? It would be ridiculous if they knew each other. It'd be absolutely
just
ridiculous.
Crazy.
So silly. Why are we even wasting our time thinking about something like this? Anyway.
But that's what makes me feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, like I
feel like they knew something that I don't know about a moving island.
Now I kind of want to like fall down a research rabbit hole on that.
Yeah.
There has to be something to it. They're getting that from somewhere. Ulmo uprooted an island which long had stood alone amid the sea, far from either shore, since the tumults of the fall of Iluin, which was a big mess. So I'm wondering, is this island actually flotsam, like a fallen part of those lamps that were destroyed? I don't know. Maybe that's why it's movable. With the aid of his servants, he moved it as it were a mighty ship, and anchored in the Bay of Balar, into which Sirion poured his water. So yeah, he drags the Vanyar and the Noldor across. The Vanyar are the guys who went to Amon and were like, "This is pretty sweet," and they just stayed. The Noldor were there for a long time, which is why one of the things they got right on that stupid show was that Galadriel did grow up in Amon because her family was still there. Anyway. Yeah.
So here's a weird thing I found by searching. It's I don't know how accurate this is, but it's on the internet, so believe
it's gotta
it.
be.
Sounds legit.
Gotta be true.
Yeah. It says the most famous mythical floating island of the Middle Ages is certainly that encountered by Saint Brendan of Ardfert and Clonfert.
Oh, the navigator.
Yeah, during his alleged Atlantic wanderings in search of the Terra. Yeah, I'm gonna totally mess that up. Or Paradise, according to chapters 10 and 11 of Navigatio Sancti Brendani, the oldest extant manuscript of which dates to the 10th or 11th century. Saint Brendan and his men come upon an island. He urged his men to land on the island, and they did so, finding it to be rocky with no sandy shore and just a few trees, but no other plants. The monks spent the night in prayer on the island while Brendan remained in the boat. In the morning, Brendan ordered his men to sing mass, and they did so. And then they brought meat and fish from the boat to the island, started a fire, but when the water in the pot was about to boil, the island began to move, and the monks ran to the boat, leaving behind everything they had brought ashore, and begged Brendan for protection. Brendan then took them aboard and told them that God revealed to him that the island was in fact the largest fish in the ocean.
Whoa.
And they believed that it was real. So people actually thought these islands were real. And it's mentioned by Honorius Augustodinensis. Yeah. I'm not a Latin. It's a very long word. But various numbers of Latin named people actually thought these were real. And they appeared on maps.
There's something similar in Dr. Dolittle. The book Dr. Dolittle. I forget what it is, but it's an animal. Like they camp out on this island, and it's like a turtle's back or something. It's like a sea turtle.
Honorius Augustodunensis, I think is how you say his name. It's a very long name. But yeah, that's weird that they're on maps. So I'm wondering if that
has to be it.
Yeah.
It's a saint. It's a story of a saint went around during the Middle Ages. Yeah, that's got to be it. I think I've even heard the guys on the Amun Sul podcast talk about Saint Brendan before as a backdrop to a couple things. So that makes sense to me.
They appeared in the Grail romances.
Man, nothing more romantic than a Grail, man.
I don't know how to say it, but there's a mythical island formed of an amalgamation of 4 elements following creation, which floated about until it came to a steady position in the Western Ocean.
That was America.
It's the island version of Captain Planet. Captain Island.
Nashin was once miraculously transported to this island where he sees a ship built by Solomon.
That's going to be the title. What even is Ireland?
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So we're all floating island now.
Yeah, I guess if you write medieval fiction, then you got to include a floating island in there.
I'm down.
Whether it be an actual island or a body of an animal.
Sign me up. I'm gonna vote
like
for
a nightmare.
Obese mermaid.
That's a great idea.
You know, I'm way behind the times, so we just watched Wakanda Forever yesterday. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it has
Black Panther 2.
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
And it has like
good.
Are they Mayans or Aztecs? I think they're Aztecs. But it's like these people that like eat or drink part of the blue flower, and then they get like special water, but it was like an underwater blue flower, so they get like underwater breathing abilities. So it's like this whole underwater like Aztec/Mayan society. So while I was reading this chapter to refresh myself on it again, I was like kept imagining like blue people. And I was like, that's not the same. But it is interesting how like the different mythologies have different water myths.
water cities. Like,
yeah,
there's so many different Atlantis type myths.
Especially with them being like the, older native civilizations, they're on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, you have all of Europe like imagining things out in the West,
mm-hmm.
and then here you actually have civilizations out there.
While we're bringing up movies that are connected, one that we've completely forgotten that does have floating islands is the classic film Waterworld.
With Costner?
Yeah.
Yes, classic.
So
I'm sure there were floating islands on Caladan in the Dune universe. Caladan was like 80% water.
Yeah, I agree.
I will get you guys onto Dune. I know.
Yeah.
I know Zach was starting to read it at some point. I'm sure that went by the wayside.
It did. Yeah.
It always does.
Someday,
somehow. Gonna make it all right, but not right now.
Wow.
Anyway.
I know you want to break away, but
Thank you. Nothing forever can't hold a candle to this comedy. So another thing, and I think we kind of touched on it in a previous episode, but I want to come back to it because there was a reference made to this, but there was disagreement among the Valar as to whether to invite the elves to come to Valinor. And part of it came up again in this chapter. Ulmo's been running his island ferry service, and his servant Ase kind of gets a little salty because he misses the Teleri who have been hanging out where he hangs out, and they've been chilling and swapping stories or singing sea shanties, whatever they did. There was some singing involved, so maybe it was sea shanties, I don't know. But so eventually groups have gone over, and I'm trying to, okay, and so they begged Ulmo to stay their voyage. So they want the elves that followed Olwe, they were Elway's people. They were Elway's people, and of course he's in the woods staring at Melian for 1,000 years, and so they take Olwe as their king, his brother, and they decide they want to go over to Valinor, and then so they begged Ulmo to stay their voyage, and Ulmo granted their request, and at his bidding, Ase made fast the island and rooted it into the foundations of the sea. Ulmo did this the more readily, for he understood the hearts of the Teleri, and in the council of the Valar, he had spoken against the summons, thinking that it were better for the Quendi to remain in Middle-earth. So obviously he got overruled, because I'm pretty sure he's the only one who said, I think they should stay. Do we have any opinion about whether it was the right call for them to go over?
So the two options, one is they live in a land where they are ruled by the people that knew the creator the best. So basically, let's call that the equivalent of a Christian nationalist society. Then there's the other option of them staying in Middle-earth, and they have much more liberty there to do what they want to do. And there are other, there are the bad creatures there as well, living, the Sauron's folks. And so let's say that that's the group that's more liberal, like classically liberal. So this is a debate about Christian nationalism.
Oh.
Is that what you're saying?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, maybe that's a bit much.
But
Ulmo is the only one who's not there. So he just wants. He's just like, yeah, I want him to stay over here.
I want him here.
Yeah. There's no reason for them to go to the sea, really, if they're over there. If the trees are around, and so of course it's because he wants to see them. Everybody wants to see him.
He's being self-serving. He wants the Eldar all to himself.
Yeah, selfish.
I think Ase definitely is. But I could see that. I could see that of Ulmo too.
Oh, is it Ase that's the only one who wants it, or I thought Ulmo did in the earlier one?
Well, no, not. I think it's kind of both. So in this chapter, Ase, he's hanging out with the Teleri all the time, and it said something. He was ill-pleased that the voices of the Teleri should be heard no more in his domain. That was Ase, his little helper.
Selfish.
Yeah, so selfish. And of course, he's the guy who he did fall in with Melkor at one point, and was restored. So, I think it's perfectly acceptable or it makes sense to see some selfishness in him even still, because of that tendency.
To go back to my kind of ridiculous thing, it is true that liberal societies, democratic ones, tend to be more sea oriented, and societies that are a little bit more structured and hierarchical tend to be more associated with mountains, and land. So I'm not completely crazy. Right?
No.
Hear me out. Hear me out.
Just half crazy like usual.
Yeah.
You're on par.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're hitting your
being
your
nuts
average.
out here. Yeah.
Okay. We need that.
They can't all be winners. I just tried.
Status quo.
I'm biased because Ulmo's my boy, so I'll be glad to be an Ulmo defender. Does anybody think he was wrong? Do you think it was Eru's intended will for them to go to Valinor, potentially to stay forever?
Well, where were they created?
Yeah, they wake up in Middle Earth, baby.
And
I don't see Qui-Viennon over there.
It does seem like history has been constructed in a way that forces many of them to go back. So you can make arguments on either side.
Yeah, I think the Valar on a whole were so hyped to meet the children of Iluvatar, right? They were so stoked. Ale couldn't hold on, and he made the dwarves just to get out ahead of it, because he was so excited. I think they were so excited they wanted them to be around, but they didn't want to be in Middle Earth, and so they had to bring them to them. I think it's a little bit the selfishness of the Valar of we're gonna be the lords of this world, right? We've been delegated all this authority by the One, but we've already fought a war. We're done. We're not going to step in anymore. We already had to fight Melkor. Mandos has him chained up at this moment, and we're just going to sit back and chill and let them come to us. I think this is what ends up making this divide and sadness among the elves living in Middle Earth. They're all pining to go back. All of the elves whose forefathers went to Valinor, all are just wistful to go back. Except for the wood elves who never did go, but Legolas's people. But they get up to trouble of their own. So I don't know. I don't think it was a wrong move, but I think they should have visited and then gone back. They should have made them all go back.
What I think was interesting though is how when the elves when they went, they learned different skills depending on who they were, and so they were educated in a sense. They grew in knowledge. And that contributed both obviously good and bad to later history in many ways, and some of that knowledge is corrupted. But I think even when it talks about how like they kind of longed for the stars at first, like when they had left, they missed the stars because they were in the light of the trees to some extent. But then they grew to love the trees, and many of them actually went closer to the trees over time. And I think what was just something that I had to remind myself when I was reading it is that we're talking about the same Eldar. Like they lived for a really long time.
Yeah.
You know, because you're talking about the significance of the passage of time in this one.
Yes.
And they're not, it's not generational.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it is in a sense generational because like it's talking about, you know, new children and offspring, but the others are still living also. So they're experiencing this in their lifetime, that growing in knowledge. And so I think it's good that they went in a sense, because it seems like it needed to happen for especially the role that Tolkien seems to use for them as kind of the keepers of the story of history. And in this case, they're pre-men.
Right.
So I think that was something that they needed to have that knowledge so that later they can serve as counsel in later times. So that there would be some semblance of like looking to paradise, if you were kind of it makes me think like heavenward. I don't feel like I have the right words for Middle Earth, but
well, it's weird because heaven is a place on Earth in the Silmarillion.
Very 80s. Did
very
Tolkien write in the
80s.
80s?
we will now imagine it as the those book covers that you showed, Maddie, with the 80s looking dudes on the front. The Tailspin books.
I'm imagining David Bowie as Gandalf now.
Oh, that's
like some
cool.
lasers and like a tiger. Yeah.
I'm glad what you said, Maddie, about you know, having seen the Blessed Realm and gone home. Like so many of the folks, especially folks that are named near the end of this chapter, are some of the biggest heroes of the First Age, and people who went to Valinor and came back, established essential kingdoms of elves that were huge and important strongholds for the good during the wars, because the First Age is just war upon war upon war. And I do think without having gone to see the Valar, the face to face, and seeing the goodness of their realm, I think it would have been a lot easier for some of these folks to fall sway to Morgoth's lies, right? Because he was already lying in the past and making elves afraid of the Valar, saying that they were all evil and he was the only good one. And then you go there, I'm like, are you kidding? The trees that light our world are there with them, and Melkor lives in a hole in the ground and freezes everything to death.
Yeah.
So yeah,
he's basically an evil Santa Claus.
He's Krampus.
Yeah. Yeah. He lives at the North Pole.
He wants to eat your fingers and toes.
Yes. Like, yeah.
It's frostbite. It checks
What's
out.
so interesting about like kind of the thought experiment is how bad I get, like you brought up the point, the wars and everything with Melkor. I guess they wouldn't have had as much strength or will to fight, I think, had they not gone and then come to return. But then there's also that added complexity of part of the war that comes later has to do with the fact that they did leave and then came back. So it's
a
just
two-edged
kind of,
sword for them.
yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. And then like you're saying, like some of the heroes, like towards the end of this, names that most of us know if you're familiar with the main books. Like I think of Lothlorien and places like that where Galadriel is. It's kind of like a little mini Valinor. But it's like a little temple almost.
Yeah. A little very, very temple-ish. Didn't they the way that she's described her hair being golden as if it was lit by the light of Laurelin, which was the more golden lighted tree. The other one, Telperion, had more of a silver light. And she carries that to Lothlorien. She even takes so one thing to talk about Lothlorien, they talk about the tree. So Yavanna made so in Tirion upon Tuna, which is an elf city in Valinor. So elves are starting to live there. Since of all things in Valinor, they loved most the white tree, Yavanna made for them a tree like to a lesser image of Telperion, save that it did not give light of its own being. So it reflected the light, right, I guess, of the actual trees, the two trees. Galathilion, it was named in the Sindarin tongue. This tree was planted in the courts beneath Mindon, and there flourished, and its seedlings were many in Eldamar. Of these seedlings that came from this tree that Yavanna made to be planted in this city, this elvish city in Valinor, of these, one was afterwards planted in Tol Eressëa, and it prospered there. So this is the Lonely Island, now parked outside of Valinor in the ocean, and it prospered there and was named Celeborn, which is also the name of Galadriel's husband. So he's named for that tree. So it makes sense that Galadriel, whose hair is lit as if it as it were by the light of Laurelin, is also married to a guy named after a silver tree. Thence came in the fullness of time, as is elsewhere told, Nimloth, the white tree of Numenor, of which a seedling of that is the white tree of Gondor.
Yeah.
So we have a huge, again, I think this is coming back to your point, Maddie, of it really was good for them to go to Valinor in the ultimate sense, because we now have this line of doom, you could say, seedling upon seedling from this one blessed tree trickling into the nations of Middle Earth, elves and men.
It reminds me a bit of like the end of Hebrews, where he talks about like the citizenship in heaven and how they're longing for a different city. And as you get that just kind of vibe throughout, because the elves are always longing kind of for Valinor and the things that they know are out there, but yet their job is here now,
and looking toward the trees of life in this world instead of tree of life. But
and how he points to like kind of the heroes of the faith, how they were all pointing towards and looking towards not the one that they actually got, but the one that they were looking towards. And in the same way, there's like elements of that in here, that there's like with the tree of Gondor, it's like this faint withering little flame of past hope almost, but then it gets revived and it starts coming back, and you see glimpses of that throughout Tolkien's writings, that kind of longing to bring the light back that was lost.
Yeah, and the people who live especially with Turgon and Melian, they do get the benefit of living, as it were, among the light of the trees, because Melian, being a Maiar, or being of the Maiar, kind of carries that light with her, because she's of the race of the Valar. And so, yeah, some of that is already dwelling in Middle Earth through her, and their line ultimately is really important toward redeeming that dying tree in Gondor much later, which is pretty interesting. I kind of see the elves in Valinor as almost a redemptive act. Like they've tasted and seen, man, to butcher a Bible verse, they've tasted and seen that Eru is good. And so they've had a very tangible experience of the goodness of Eru through his mediated presence in the Valar. And then they take that home with them, if not in tangible ways, in their hearts, so to speak, almost like a conversion. And then they're a witness to the truth at home. And so in so many ways, and even in the failings and sin of Feanor and his sons to come later, spoiler alert, all that gets redeemed. I think those are very important and interesting redemptive threads that make a lot of sense to me. And we're just starting to see them here, because we get Feanor, we get the sense that he's not great. Like, he's very talented, but he's a very dark personage. His spirit burned as a flame. Like, it's pretty ominous doom right there.
Unless you're Pentecostal.
Yeah, unless you're Pentecostal. Speaking of these guys, and I'm curious, especially because thinking, in terms of Tolkien being Roman Catholic, but in this chapter there was mention that there were the Valar did kind of play favorites among clans of the elves. Manwë and Varda loved the Vanyar, the fair ones, and they're the ones that stay permanently in Valinor. The Noldor were beloved by Eldalie, which is problematic sometimes, because I've spoken before about the kind of the Eldalie to Melkor pipeline that occurs sometimes, and it's definitely true of the Noldor. But you were mentioning earlier, Maddie, about the skills that were learned, and those guys are the ones that learned mad skills in Valinor.
Yeah, for sure. And then it backfired a little bit.
As soon as it said, what was it? I'm gonna try to find it, about earth gems.
Yeah, you're like, oh no, here it goes.
Yeah. I'm like, great. Now I know where we're headed next. Yeah, I would assume they're the ones that built Tirion. So being great craftsmen, and bricklayers, jewel setters, and of course, who would be the best Vala to learn that stuff from, if not Eldalie, right?
Right. I thought it was an interesting contrast that it says that the Noldor gave them freely from the dwarves, who would hoard and keep theirs, but then you had the Noldor who just showered the gifts on everyone. I thought that was pretty cool.
With this crafting stuff, one of the things that and maybe it's not a perfect correlation, but I think about technology, particularly early technology. It was a lot easier to say, yeah, this is a good thing, up until about the Industrial Revolution, and especially now, something that helps you get more crops and feed your family easier. That's good. We can support that technology. Something that makes it easier to read, like books, as opposed to papyrus or whatever. Great, we're all on board. But now, there is, and so Eldalie you know, the idea of having somebody who's crafting things, great. But then later on, the crafting becomes a little bit less clear, clearly a good thing. And and I think, you know, we have that today with like cell phones or the internet or AI, not Allen Iverson, artificial intelligence. but you know,
Good
those things are a
distinction.
little bit less clear. And I think it's pretty similar to this situation, where you go from a clearer crafting being fine to less good.
And crafting for bad motives too, you know.
Yeah.
Eventually Feanor, especially, who's a very skilled craftsman, ends up crafting things for basically his own renown, you know, to be famous or to show off how good he is at it. And that's when his creations start causing harm. You know, he's not giving those things, he's not giving that stuff away. And then things get stolen instead. I'm trying not to give too much away, but
for him, invention is the mother of necessity.
Yes. Oh man, yes. Oh, that's good. Good gravy.
Tolkien definitely likes to hold this subject at attention, because he's not willing to just outright say that, you know, fashioning and shaping and working in technology is just bad. He certainly holds that in attention, where it's as complex, I feel, as it is in real life, as you can depict in fiction, where you have these beautiful things that can be powerful and good in the right hands, and bad in the wrong. And then, you know, ultimately, like we know, the Ring of Power, where it's a corrupting power. But he certainly likes to handle this topic, I would almost argue, most of all throughout his works.
Yeah, it seems like all these things that are sometimes literally or even figuratively forged in the fires of industry are often more harmful than they are helpful. But somebody who tells a story or writes a song is never morally questionable in Tolkien's universe. If you notice.
That's true.
In Rivendell, the elves just sit around making up new songs. When anybody comes to visit the last homely house, one of the great activities you can do while you're there is to make or listen to great music. But nobody's making crafts in Rivendell when you go hang out. Nobody's being healed by crafting anything.
If Tolkien had lived long enough to hear Cardi B, do you think that he would have had a different view of music?
I tell you what, if he were alive in our times, he would probably recite the lyrics to Bodak Yellow on BBC Radio.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. My bad.
Yeah. That she knows poetry.
Yeah.
So in thinking about the tutelage of the Valar, I always get a resonance of like patron saints, you know, because there's like for the Vanyar, like Manwë's the patron saint of like beauty or whatever. You know, there's a patron saint of jewel makers, and that would be Eldalie. I forgot to put this in the notes, but you know, the Teleri who hang out with Ulmo and Ossë and make boats, and even it mentions Círdan the shipwright, who is still alive even into the Third Age. He's the guy that ferries everyone to the Undying Lands when they leave Middle Earth. So he's still around, he learns all this stuff, learns his love of the sea from Ulmo and Ase. Basically the patron saint of shipwrights. Granted, it's more it would be like if you had lots of Gabriels and Michaels to be your patron saints, but but still, I wonder if that's what he had on his mind when these Vala the Valar are taking different peoples of the Eldar under their wing and teaching them a thing or two.
I am still on team pagan gods, but
would you like to clarify that statement?
Well, Nick, it's been nice having you on the show. I wish you the best for the rest of your podcasting career.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
But I also don't think that that's too far off from what patron saints are.
Oh,
so
we lost all of our Catholic followers.
Did we have any?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
Of the 9 that follow us on YouTube who aren't us, wonder how many of them are Roman Catholic.
I'm not sorry. So I was about to apologize there, but then I realized I'm not that sorry. It's sorry, not sorry. It is pretty similar, and it doesn't. I don't see how it becomes cool if they're just people.
We don't say that like R.C. Sproul is like our patron saint of book
Diet
writing.
Coke. Oh.
Or Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diet Coke, book writing.
Oh.
You know.
I better take down my icon of RC over here in the corner before I change my camera. Hold on.
But I bring that up because basically I agree with you, Nick, that the patron saints really they function exactly the same as the pagan gods did.
Like territorial spirits.
Yeah. I mean, you think of Luther's, prayer to Saint Anne when he was in the lightning storm. People just looked to the saints of wherever they were from or whatever subject matter that they covered, and that function exactly the same as pagan gods have always functioned, which is different than just appreciating the role of that particular faith hero and looking to them as an example. That's fine. We can do that. But to go and be like, oh, they're the patron saint of frogs or patron saint of home remodel.
Taxi drivers.
Yeah, taxi drivers.
Or there was a saint who got flayed alive and then dismembered, and he's the patron saint of butchers.
I was gonna say knives.
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
I want to become the patron saint of 3D printed fish.
It's done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen. We can canonize you in the
Please.
Reformed Baptist sainthood.
Yes.
Yeah. I keep track of it.
It's one of
so far
at church.
So far in the Reformed Baptist sainthood, all we have is 3D printed fish. That's all we have in our calendar.
Someone has to do the patron saint of 3D printed loaves.
Oh, that yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
To feed the 5,000.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Or 3D printed long lobes of the liver for Old Testament practice.
Yeah. Why not?
I think we should canonize Sam Renahan as the patron saint of real life hobbits. But he'll be canonized under the saint name Samwise Gamgee Renahan.
Yes, I concur.
Right.
So I formally submit that to the credentialing committee.
Yeah, accepted. It's accepted.
Yes. Oh, we should do this more often.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well.
Next episode, I want at least 2 more candidates for Reformed Baptist
sainthood,
and what their realms of influence will be.
Sweet.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, that's really important. This is how we're going to revive Christendom.
Yeah, we need to build out feast calendar as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, I already have like a feast
calendar.
I have a Charles Spurgeon icon in my house, so
beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
patron
with this
saint of smoking cigars.
There you go.
Yeah.
Even though we don't, but
well,
I think it would be helpful with our feast calendar if it also came with a directive of a different casserole for each feast. So no creativity will be necessary.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. I would love that because
you could do different variations though, because it's the creation within the framework of that casserole.
That's true. There could be orthodox variations within that one.
There you go.
Main directive. I like that. Yeah, I do like that. Zach, I specifically wanted to pick your brain on the musical aspect of this chapter, talking about the Teleri. They were torn. It's so interesting to me. So they're the ones. The Teleri were like the last to come over. Right. Some of them were looking for their king, Elwë, who was dating Melian at the time by standing in the woods and staring at each other for centuries. And so some of them missed the call to get on the island ferry, and they stayed back, and others were like, yeah, we're gonna make his brother the king, because that's how succession works, and we'll go with them to. So like the Teleri are kind of split, and the Teleri that were on the island and didn't want to go over. They were stuck kind of between a rock and a hard place, no pun intended. They loved the music of the waves, which is the phrase that Tolkien uses, but then they also missed their relatives who went on into Aman, and they had to do some soul searching between basically aesthetics and family connection.
So you just want me to run with that? Like, I didn't hear a question, Lee.
I don't know that I have a question. It's a weird quandary to me. And as the most musical of us, can you clear up said quandary? As someone with an enormous family and background in music.
It's probably not. I feel like this was, you get very the elves are very romantic, right? Like everything they do is like, oh, I'm gonna stare at stars for 1,000 years, and I'm gonna listen to the music of the waves for the next 2,000 years, and I'm gonna stare at this one chick in the woods for 100 years. And it's like it's all extreme because they have such longevity. It's they can just devote so much thought and intent to one thing,
especially an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, it's like you can just you have nothing but time on your hands, and you can just, it's almost like almost like a meditation, right? Like you empty everything else except for this one thought, and you just become consumed with that one thing they just have so much time and nothing but time, really. Just like, we don't have anything else to do, so let's do this. And then after a while you're like, okay, well, I guess I got enough of that. I think maybe I should go see Dad. But I don't.
Yeah, I guess when you live a life where where the significance of the passage of time is not relevant to you,
right?
You can focus on aesthetic things and not like when you only live as short as we do, we don't get to focus on things like that as deeply as these guys could.
Yeah, they get completely lost in one thing that just attracts they're like raccoons, but that live forever, right? Like they see a shiny and
they're just freaking tall, beautiful raccoons.
Yeah, they go get the shiny thing, or like ravens or crows or whatever.
Yeah,
like you see something shiny,
totally reordered priorities than what we would consider normal and responsible.
Yeah, because there wasn't anything to keep them from doing that, right? Because they've been now removed kind of from the danger. And so they just, hey, we're just going to chill and we're going to learn everything we can about how to make music that sounds like ocean waves. Like, I mean, that's awesome, right? And I'm sure it would be really amazing.
Well, and also, I'm also thinking about one of the names for the elves are literally translates out to those who speak with voices, because language is really important as well to the elves. And so like even the elves that live on Tol Eressëa, they end up developing their own dialect because of their separation from the rest of the Eldar in Amman.
It's like Jamaican patois version.
The Island Boys.
That's right.
So they start writing their own histories of how they got there, and it's all like Elvish patois.
Yeah.
What would they have said, Nick? You don't want to say it on the record, do you?
I don't know if I should.
That's okay. I won't make you.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question at all.
No, I think what you said made a lot of sense to me, and that's really all that matters. It's all.
But I do even it's not just the Teleri; it's all the different factions of the elves. They all have that same tendency where they just get totally lost in this one thing that they're focused on, and it's just
Feanor throws himself into the making of gems and metals to the point he really does kind of abandon his family and kind of breaks his sons and remolds them into his image. Really, of course, I don't know. There's factions out there that say Feanor did nothing wrong, but I say it as a joke sometimes. But
I think
he's almost as bad of a dude as Corn Pop, and you can take that to the bank.
I think this is one thing that Rings of Power actually did pretty well between Elrond and Durin. They get so lost in their own thing that they're doing that
you didn't come to my wedding.
Yeah, exactly. Like, didn't even cross my mind. I'm over here, I don't know what he was doing.
Yeah, because even dwarves, like, they live to be like 600 years old or something, but that's still a drop in the bucket when you never die unless somebody kills you, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Or your Feanor's mom. Anyway.
All right, cool.
That's all the powerful thoughts I had. Did you guys have any other big thoughts or takeaways from the chapter? You were right at the start, Nick, that it really is setting us up toward big stuff to come. And that's why we get kind of the name droppy stuff, especially at the end of the chapter. You know, it calls out Círdan the shipwright, who's super important. Calls out people like Feanor, Fingolfin is a major hero of the First Age, like totally based. He's one of my faves. Turgon, huge deal in the creation of Gondolin. Like Gondolin is going to be one of the most essential hubs of elvendom in Middle Earth. Finrod Felagund, he's one of my favorite elves, and really important, especially to the development of mankind in Middle Earth. And then obviously Galadriel. So Feanor, bad boy Feanor, would be her uncle. That is not Galadriel. That she is a 2CV of Galadriel.
Yeah,
that is Galadriel.
I didn't vote for her.
I'm gonna make you a shirt that says "Not my
queen.
Galadriel."
Do it. I will proudly wear it. Yeah, kids, don't watch the Rings of Power, okay? If they can make a fan edit that was just like the Elrond in Durin bromance hour, you know, that would be fine. I'd watch the crap out of that. But the rest of it, blah.
I disagree. Yeah, Touch the darkness, kids.
That's right. Yes.
That's one of the stories you tell your kids, like, you know, when I was your age, I touched the darkness. Don't do it. That's a bad idea. Just don't do that. It's a wonder I survived. You know,
man, it's all fun and games until the darkness touches you back.
I say, like, you know, one time they tried to banish me to heaven and I didn't want to go. And so I swam the entire ocean to go back home. Don't ever do that, kids. It's really dangerous. I did it. I barely survived, although the show didn't look like it really affected me much at all, but just don't do it. That's a public service announcement. Don't swim the entire ocean.
You can't do it. I've tried.
Yeah, you can't. You don't need that sense of failure on your soul. Whoa, or it turns you into a genocidal maniac, which is basically what Rings of Power Galadriel is. We hit a lot of the bingo.
We did.
Bingo points.
We got a lot of bingo points.
We did a really good job, you guys. We're so good at this.
Yes.
If we got any better, I don't even think you could listen to the show. It's too polished.
That's different than being polished.
With that, may Monway keep you in the one, and peace out.
Woo-woo.
What was the droid language in Star Wars that C-3PO got himself in with Luke Skywalker's family because he could speak it? It's been so long since I've watched those movies.
In episode 1?
Well, episode 4 technically.
Oh,
I thought you were talking about the one.
Trilogy. Oh, I thought you were talking about Anakin, not Luke.
No.
I don't know the language.
Because like they were having a trouble with like a condenser or something, and he's like, "Oh, I speak blah blah blah."
Oh, well, he speaks like a billion languages or whatever.
Yeah, he's like a language.
He's a language droid. Yeah.
Protocol.
He's also super obnoxious.
Protocol.
He's a protocol droid.
That's right.
Not a language droid.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. He speaks languages.
We all
by
speak
far
languages.
The weirdest of the languages we know that 3PO can speak is the language we see him speak when he attempts to enter Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. That language is Polish.
What?
He speaks Polish.
That makes sense.
That's awesome. That makes sense.